Welcome to Storm Tracker, your eye on the storm of your Carolina Hurricanes, and your home for the best insight and analysis to keep you totally informed on what's happening with the Canes. Whether it's the latest news on the ice or off the ice, we've got you covered. Now let's begin. Here's your host, Tom Ray.
Well, not surprising, the Chicago Wolves got off to a bit of a slow start this year. A number of first-year pros on the team, players like Felix Under Sorum, Nadeau, Scott Morrow, and others playing their first year of pro hockey and obviously in a tough league in the AHL. But lately, it's been a different story. In fact, the Wolves have been red hot recently. They've won 4 straight after a big win today and are 9 of 12. As well. So they are playing great hockey, and I'm delighted, as always, the middle of the month, it's time to talk about Chicago Wolves. And coming in to join us, our Chicago Wolves insider, Andrew Rinaldi. Andrew, how's it going, man?
It's going great, Tom. Thanks once again for having me on. Always love talking some Wolves hockey with you.
Well, yeah, for sure. And the Wolves are great to talk about these days because they have been playing so well. And right up and down the lineup. And I know you've got some great thoughts on what's been driving this great skid for them, where they've won 9 of their 12 and playing just outstanding hockey at both ends of the rink. So what are you seeing with the Wolves these days?
I mean, honestly, it's really not that much departed from what it looked like the first month or so into the season, where they controlled the play for stretches of games at times. It's just as a matter of kind of fitting into the system, dialing it in, and the little details. The things that seem so small and trivial to us are really the things that decide hockey games at the end of the day. And, those puck battles that might have been lost here, or an errant defensive pinch that led to an odd man rush and a goal the other way, or now the Wolves are cleaning that kind of stuff up. And the finishing is been much better this as of late, and you're starting to see more of the the numbers and the results that are more indicative of the style of play kind of more to fruition, which is just it's just kind of the process coming together is really all it is these young guys settling in. Line combinations that are starting to find a little more chemistry. I'm going to point my first example I'm going to point to is that Suzuki, Nadeau, Jaska line, which, took a little bit to kind of really get going, but is now the straw that's been stirring the drink for this team. And, they've gone up against some of the top competition in division lately and have not just come out on top, but have emphatically come out on top. So it's been a real feel good vibe for the Wolves here lately, and it's been a lot of fun to cover. I can tell you that much.
Well, I'm sure, and it seems like the noise is kind of dissipated from some early concerns that ownership had with the Wolves, of course, getting off to that slow start. So looks like that's kind of behind us. Interesting comments, and I think you're right on with what you're saying too, Andrew, because we think about it, we had Cam Abbott coming in, and he was learning the Canes, style and form of play. You had several youngsters coming in and playing professional hockey in North America for the first time. You can go up and down the lineup, gosh, a bunch of them. And again, very few had played together in the past, so you had folks trying to find their way on new lines with new defensive pairings and so on. And then goaltending challenges, because you had goaltenders coming up and going down, and some injuries and some different things with the Hurricanes that affected the goaltending here as well. But again, it's exciting to see. And you've mentioned something which I really wanted to get into, which is that top line. And let's take a look at Ryan Suzuki for a minute. So Suzuki, here's what was written about him in McKean's in the prospect profile last year. They said he's had a rough path since being drafted 28th overall in 2019. So he was drafted in that first round. On top of the impacts of the pandemic, he's had a long list of injuries, including a high stick to the eye that left him with a permanent blind spot. We remember he was out for an extended period with that, and that was a tough one. But here's what they say. if he can remain healthy, he's a very promising prospect. He's a line driver, consistently pushing the pace and leading his team to scoring opportunities. He has great hands with highlight reel abilities when one-on-one with defenders. So these are high words of praise for Suzuki, and guess what? We're seeing some of that, right?
Absolutely. And I've seen so much of it from the going all the way back to that COVID year where the OHL had suspended play, so he was allowed to play in the AHL along with guys like Phil Tomasino and Seth Jarvis for a minute, which is it was a really weird year in the American Hockey League, in the world in general. But
sure,
you saw flashes of that, and watching that young teenage Suzuki then grow up into a guy who was a big part of that Wolves Calder Cup team, but unfortunately, because of those aforementioned health issues, wasn't really a member of the product on the ice, at least during the playoffs and all that. Then rolling into the 23 year, you really kind of started to see him blossom from that a little bit, and again, it's just if it's been one thing or the other, the loss of the affiliation last year, I thought was really kind of another derailment in this kid's path to the NHL. Like, oh geez, here we go again. And then he gets into that area where the Canes got him to a 1 year kind of prove it contract. He had to pass through waivers just to get to Chicago, and here he is, and it could have been so easy for this kid to just be like, well, woe is me and all that, and hang your head down. Here you are. You're the only kid in your draft class in the first round who hasn't played any NHL games, and
right.
You're watching your brother up there in Montreal just being adored by all the fans, and just it's been just a string of bad luck to really kind of lead him to where he is, and after game one, I was able to just get a chat with him and be like, what's this fight been like? And to see, his spirit wasn't really down in the dumps or anything. He was excited to be back in Chicago. He was and just to get back to playing the game of hockey. And now he's got structure. He's got his health, and you're seeing him really kind of, I said blossoming before, but even to another level, really, at this point, he's been driving that top line, not just offensively, but defensively, man. He's been, I don't think he gets enough credit for what he brings on that defensive side of the game. We throw around that whole 200-foot player guy, seems kind of left and right, but this guy embodies that. And it's kind of, again, I was just talking, watching him grow up from that young teenager with a lot of promise, and now I wouldn't necessarily call him a veteran even by this league standards, but now he's taking on more of that leadership role where it's like, all right, boys, kind of follow my lead, and he'll take this team as far as they can go. It's really been a treat to watch Ryan Suzuki kind of grow up here, and I think when Jack Drury went down, that there was probably a lot more consideration in bringing him up than maybe was spoken at surface level. Although I think, given the circumstances, calling Tyson Jost up was probably the right call in the short and long term. But I think if Suzuki keeps this up, there's going to be a lot more difficult conversations for Carolina here, especially, with that 1 year contract. It's like, okay, what are we going to do with this kid? It's not a bad position for an organization to be in, to have to make those difficult decisions.
Well, Suzuki, obviously the Canes are in desperate need of depth at center ice. They really have not drafted big center prospects in recent years, and so it puts him in a good position. And I think that's one of the reasons they re-upped him in the offseason again. But I saw him last year in the prospect showcase, and he just undressed the goalie on 2 or 3 shootout goals and breakaways that he had and so on. His skill level's off the charts. but he's doing well. He's got 21 points in 23 games. Now he scored again today. So he's definitely showing the promise that the Canes had for him. And if he stays healthy, as you say, and working on a line with the likes of Juha Jaska and, of course, Bradley Nadeau, you've got a couple of guys that can really get it done. I mean, Nadeau, who's headed off to join Team Canada, of course, for the junior tourney starting here shortly. Man, he's been amazing. Here's what McKean said about Nadeau, and this is kind of funny. They said, you could give Nadeau the nickname Mr. Coast to Coast, both for his extreme continental crisscrossing over the past few seasons, as well as his ability to make highlight reel plays in transition. This guy is just something else. And again, he's a player that when you've seen him, there's so many highlights, and I've got some great ones that we'll be talking about. He's a guy that he just makes super plays, whether it's setting up somebody else or that wicked shot that he has. He's got that booming slap shot that he just beats goalies on regularly. He's really finding his way now as well.
Absolutely. And I think there's really not a much better compliment than to have a guy like Ryan Suzuki centering his wing. And I mean, just to be able to set him up in ways that not a lot of guys at this level can. And again, to kind of show him the ropes of what it takes to be a successful professional hockey player. Suzuki has been around, championship teams here in Chicago. And, those habits that he learns from, the Podorowskis and the Nasons of that 22 team, he now is transitioning as a leader to lead on the Bradley Nadeau. And what really surprised me kind of is, I was well and familiar with his shot and everything coming in. But I think just kind of the dynamic of that top line and just between all three forwards I watched a beautiful goal against Grand Rapids the other night where Suzuki setting Nadeau up, and I'm like, all right, here he is. He's going to wire this one home, and instead he feeds Ty Smith over for the back door, and it was a piece of art. Yes. And those kind of plays that weren't necessarily being made, and maybe sometimes coaches might lament at like the one extra pass, whatever. But it's as long as the puck's going in, it's all good. But you're seeing these guys so much more confidence with the puck. And I mean, it was the first month of the season was just so timid. They'd be in shooting areas and then they'd be looking off for a pass or just not having that kind of confidence where now you're seeing them and Nadeau's just ripping them. And it's been a lot of fun to watch. There's certainly, he's got, just like any young player, things to work on, things to improve in, but at this level where he can get is just, top line minutes, power play time, throwing a little bit of penalty killing here and there. He gets those opportunities to work on just any and all areas of his game. And that's just going over and having the opportunity to play for the country on your jersey probably isn't too bad for him either. So it's going to sting in Chicago not having him around for a little bit, but you know what? I think the kid's going to be just fine. No,
exactly. And again, with Nadeau, he's a guy that is fortunate enough to be able to be playing in Chicago this year. He's getting, because of the strength of the Canes, they can leave him in Chicago just like they're able to leave Ryan Suzuki and give them the kind of mentorship and coaching that's going to benefit them tremendously. And I think that's a key part of what, the Canes have been doing in recent years. And even adding veterans to the mix. And you talked about Juha Jaska. Now, Jaska is an interesting one. When he was signed in the offseason, nobody really knew who Juha Jaska was. I mean, they were going, Jaska, who's that? In any case, Don Waddell did. And he said, Juha is a veteran forward who brings energy and intensity to every shift. He's performed consistently in Finland, and we're excited to see what he can do in North America. And Rod Brindamore, after he had him in camp, said some similar things. And he said he's a hard worker. He's a typical Finnish guy, and that we've had over the years. He just plays hard. So again, good strong words about Jaska. It took him a little while to kind of get his sea legs. I think at the start of the year he sat out a game or two just trying to find his way. But boy, he's been on a tear. He scored again today. And so, what are you seeing in Jaska?
I seeing a microcosm of the entire Chicago Wolves season in Jaska. You know, those first 8 games without a point, you're kind of like, you know, some guys they're more comfortable in their home countries, and that's perfectly fine. I've seen that quite often in Grand Rapids with some guys like Pontus Andreasen, but you know, once he kind of again got settled in along with the rest of the lineup, you saw the hockey IQ, and you saw the talent to be able to, you know, get himself open up for shots, and they just weren't going in. You're gripping the stick a little tight. I mean, we've all been there. You got the yips, and they're just not going in. Once he got that first one against Milwaukee back in November, you literally could see the weight just lifted off of his shoulders and the relief of finally getting it, and the floodgates just absolutely opened for this guy and for the rest of the team, really. And I've really loved to see what he's been able to bring with Suzuki and Nadeau. Just the chemistry that they've maintained has been almost instant. You know, the first couple of weeks of the season, every line, they're kind of in a blender and everything. But once those guys came together, something just clicked. And, you know, that happens sometimes with a lot of these guys. They just know how to read off each other so well. And it's, I mean, you know, the results kind of speak for themselves there. And Jaska has been just an absolute pleasant surprise. I think you're right. I honestly, I had no film on him. I really wasn't quite sure. You could read Elite Prospects page or whatever, but you're not really sure what you're getting from this guy. And,
Right.
you know, Rod was right. When he's out there, there's not a lot of guys that are going to outwork him when he's out there on the ice. Offensive zone, neutral zone, defensive zone, doesn't matter. You know, he's a hound on the puck, and he knows where to be. And I can't tell you how many times Suzuki's been able to find him in that soft spot in the high slot, and he's been able to just pick his corners over the last couple of games. And now he's got the confidence, now he's got the rhythm, and, you know, 0 points in his first 8 games, and he's got 13 points in his last 13. So, like I said, if that's not a microcosm of the season for the Wolves, I don't know what is.
Well, interestingly enough, he's a solid guy. He's 6 foot, almost 200 pounds. So he plays a solid game. He's a good skater, of course. And he played in Liga last year in Finland, and he had in the playoffs, he had 5 goals and 2 assists for 7 points in 7 games. So again, he's a guy that you know, he's coming over a little bit later at 26, but do you think he might ever see the Hurricanes lineup?
If he keeps playing like this, absolutely. And you know, that's just the thing about this, the game at this level is, you know, you can always wonder, like, what if, and sometimes it might feel like, you know, the crabs in the bucket, you're just always trying to kind of like grab another guy so you can pull your way up. I mean, you just kind of got to play your game. You never know when the opportunity is going to come, when the call is gonna arrive. And even if it's not, you know, Carolina, there could be a scout for St. Louis watching that game that's like, hey, we really like what this guy is bringing. Let's bring him over and see what he can bring to our club. You know, there's 32 franchises in this league, and each one of them always has there's shifting parts constantly. And you never know when that chance is going to get. So, you know, those first 8 games, again, it could have been really easy for him to be like, oh, well, this is kind of a bust. I know that there's, you know, a spot waiting for me back home in Finland. So here we go. But this guy, you know, kept his nose down to the grindstone. And I guarantee you that management is looking at that like, this guy didn't give up. He's now become just such an important part of this team and its success moving forward. And, you know, if we need that kind of jolt in the locker room, it's great that we have that in our organization. We can bring him up, and his kind of style of play is the one that's going to be able to complement whatever line he's on, whether you need him to produce points, as he's done in the top line here. You need him to grind it out in the corners in front of the net on the bottom 6. He can do that too. So it's, you know, he's versatile, and like I said, all it takes is just that one phone call. It can change your entire career. So as long as he keeps playing the way he has, I see, you know, I could definitely see a handful of games and the NHL for him.
Well, that's great, and it's good to get some information on Jaska. As I said, a lot of folks don't really know much about him, so thanks for that. Thanks for that update as well, Andrew. Talking about the upcoming World Junior Tournament, of course, there's another Chicago Wolf making his way, and he'll be playing for Sweden. That's Felix Under Sorum. Now, Felix Under Sorum, of course, is the darling of many Canes fans, and they think he's going to be something special. And of course, Rod Brindamore, very excited with what he saw initially with Under Sorum. In fact, last year, he was very strong in camp and looked like he might stick around for a while. But here's a guy that is still very young, obviously under 20 years old. I think he's 19 right now. Under Sorum is a guy that the challenge with him has been that, again, they've been trying to move him to center ice. They've been trying some different things with him simply because he sees the ice so well and he has such a high hockey IQ that they think this is the kind of guy that they can really grow and help develop as a center, because that's an area of need for the Canes. It's interesting what McKean said about Under Sorum. He's a highly entertaining player, and that's for darn sure. If you watch Under Sorum, he is that. And you got to watch him because he's so slippery and elusive on the ice. And he's a guy that he's making very special plays. Lately I've been watching the highlights, and he's really been doing some incredible work out there. And he's showing a lot of confidence. I think this is the biggest difference I've seen in Under Sorum. He's picking up the puck in the O-zone, and he'll carry it around the net. He'll carry it out in front of the net. He'll take it to the side. He'll do all kinds of things with it. And he's not just dishing it off, trying to, get rid of the puck as quick as he can. He's trying to hold on and find that open player. And so I've been really excited about Under Sorum. What are you seeing?
It's, it was a work in progress for him. It's one thing already to come over from Europe to adapt to a new style, especially as a young player as him. It's a completely other thing on top of it to kind of be thrown to the wolves, no pun intended, and learning the center position on the fly on top of it.
Yes.
And so it's, it was always going to be a bit of a project for him. But again, same thing. You're starting to see, you were right, just kind of the confidence in the plays that he's making with the puck. And again, this is not just kind of a throwaway league. These are grown men that he's going up against as as a 19-year-old. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be a slog at times, and for those first few weeks of the season, it definitely was for him. And I think he hit the scene so hard with that preseason last year that I think kind of Canes fans might have thought that he was going to blow the doors down in this league. And, those who might not be quite as familiar it's a hard league to establish yourself in. It's another hard league to sustain success in, especially as these, young players that are just learning kind of the routines of professional hockey day in, day out. It's so detail oriented. It can be overwhelming at times, but Under Sorum has certainly impressed, just the way that he's been able to maintain. Again, there's a lot of young players out there that again can, just kind of throw it away and not bring it every single night. And I think he's got 5 points over the last 7 games he played before he's ended up joining Team Sweden there. So, again, this is another one of those, you're starting to see the numbers reflect more of what he's been able to bring onto the ice. And, there's growing pains here and there. Absolutely. That's for sure. But I agree with you. I really like his patience with the puck, which is, for someone at 19 years old to not immediately, gasp at the 6'3", 220-pound defender that's coming down on you on the boards, it's impressive. And, to be able to hold on to that, to have the patience to, wait for the space to open up. And it's a truly special trait in a player. And, it's paying dividends for the Wolves and for Under Sorum as well. It's going to continue to, you're going to have his good nights and his bad nights. He's going to continue to learn the center position on the fly, and especially the defensive aspect of it it's so much of the game versus, playing as a winger. I think you get a little more leeway, defensively. But at the same time, again, he's in that kind of position where he's going to have ample opportunities to learn, to grow. And with the skill set that he has, it's all just kind of being molded into this version of this player that Carolina and Chicago are going to eventually kind of see, I think, pay pretty big dividends as we get here into the dog days of the season. But that's after the World Junior Championships, of course, because he's going to be away.
And at the World Juniors, he's going to have a leadership role for his team. And again, I think that's going to be exciting to watch. And it'll be fun to see how both he and Nadeau fare against some of the young talent that's out there, same age as theirs, some of the top players in the world under 20. So it's going to be a lot of fun to check that out. One other thing I was just going to mention about Under Sorum, and this has been commented a number of times, McKean's mentioned this as well. He's got to put some weight on. He's a little bit stick thin. So he's got to bulk up a little bit, become a little sturdier on his skates. But he's a guy that's all in due course. And with his skill set, for sure, he's got a high ceiling. And I think the Canes are doing it right, giving him a chance to come over at a young age to play in Chicago, as you mentioned, Andrew, to get that, just get a feel of it, right? And you're going to have your ups and downs. It's going to be a challenge. It's a long season for these guys. So, again, we'll just keep an eye on Under Sorum, and it's great to see that he's starting to have some success right now, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can definitely agree with, I've seen a lot of guys come over and break into this league, and it's physical. It's really physical. And there's a lot of guys that are especially out there trying to show each one of their parent clubs, hey, here's what I can bring. And then, you see some of these young kids that are used to weaving in and out of junior players suddenly getting basically planted into the glass. So he's 19 years old, so we're going to kind of put it in the frame that he's got room to grow. And these are, putting on weight and all that is all things that, you can work on and at this level, but there's, those certain just kind of intangibles and certain things that you just can't teach. And I think kind of his hockey IQ is one of those that's just like, you can coach up all these other things, but that's something that I think Carolina knows that they got a special player in there. And I'm excited to see what kind of player he can grow into.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned 19 years old. There are a couple of other 19-year-olds. Of course, Bradley Nadeau is 19, and so too is Gleb Trikozov. So, these are young players coming over and getting a chance to cut their teeth in the AHL. And as you said, rightfully, a lot of guys in that league that like to just have a shot at some of these younger studs coming in and show that they can still get it done. So all good stuff with Under Sorum, and we're going to follow him closely. Any other forwards that are jumping out at you these days?
I like that you mentioned Trikozov. As I've it's a young player. Again, when it comes to confidence, I think at first, maybe it can be overwhelming, and especially you're coming over from Russia and all that. It's all of a sudden there's a McDonald's at the corner of every block. It's culture shock. It really is, and it's hard to explain that to us who've been here. I've never left North America, so it's but for him, I like that he's been able to come over here into the American Hockey League, and he's, I don't want to say protected, but he's insulated where he is in the lineup.
Right.
He doesn't have to play every night. He doesn't have the weight of the world on his shoulders as a 19-year-old. He can kind of ease into his role on the team. And even with limited minutes, I think he's been able to kind of show what he's capable of. He had the other day, he had a strong rush to the net, which should have ended up in as a goal, but it was waved off for some kind of goalie interference thing. But at any rate, I've really liked what I've seen from him. I think he's a bit more of a long-term project here for Carolina, but this is a good way to kind of introduce him to just the life of what they're expecting over here for him. And I really like what I've seen, and that's another one where it's like I think the fruits of his labor are going to be more apparent down the road, but we'll see with them. And I really like what they're bringing. There's been another forward. I've liked more of what I've seen from him lately, but I know Noel Gunler is one that a lot of folks have had their eye on for quite a while now. And I think there's a core group of players that we're kind of on the cusp of, it maybe not breaking into Carolina, but kind of breaking into the league. And I think that kind of really got hampered by the loss of the affiliation. And, there's so much that has to be, said about, okay, Chicago was awful last year. Let's call a spade. Yeah. But it hurt guys like Gunler and Jameson Reese and Anthony Honka.
Oh, yeah, those guys are pretty well gone. Yeah.
Yeah, crucial development years that are, I mean, Reese was traded away for a pittance just so he could get away from Springfield.
He's going nowhere, Jameson Reese.
It's terrible. I think he could have really been a good bottom six asset on this team. And now he's hopefully kind of can turn things around over there in the organization in Ottawa. But, Gunler is another one where he comes over here. He starts out his career in Chicago pretty strong, I thought, and then gets kind of the ship back over to Europe treatment. Doesn't quite kind of get the role I don't think that Carolina was looking for him. And now he's come back over to Chicago, and I think he's looked strong at times, but I always preach that the most important thing for these young players to learn at this level is consistency, is those habits on and off the ice that that make you so incredibly detail oriented, because you have to be. It's every little. It's hard for me to put it out there, but just those ins and outs of being a professional hockey player. You have to bring it every single night. There's no nights off. You can't have a night off. And I feel at times kind of Gunler's just not all there. And it's, I think he missed out on a lot of important development time, just being involved in the organization. You're away over there in Sweden, and I get you're in contact with the team and coaches and scouts and all that, but it's not the same as having Cam Abbott in your ear every single day and working with you and working with the team, working with guys that you're going to be teammates with for years. I mean, just the natural progression of moving up from the AHL to the NHL. I'm not saying it's the end of the world for Gunler. You feel like after he made his breakout, or he came into the league at the end of 2022, kind of got a taste of that Calder Cup, became more of a piece in 23. You would have expected now, as we're heading into 2025, he would have been a bigger part of this Chicago team, and he's there and he's playing well on most nights, but it's just you got to play well every night, and it's unfortunate to see, because I think he could have been a really good piece to this team if it just a situation out of his control last year. There's not much he could have done about it.
Well, it's interesting. Your comments are spot on to what I've got from McKean's as well. McKean's comments were that Noel Gunler has been a polarizing prospect that no one can agree on. So this is an interesting one. He was drafted 41st in 2020. So he was in the second round. This is a guy that was drafted quite high for the Canes because, of course, They've loved drafting in that second round. They've had several outstanding second rounders. We could go up and down the list. It's amazing. But here's what they also said. He has so much skill from his elite shot to his excellent hands, but his work ethic, skating, and defensive game have been points of concern. So again, similar type of thing where, and we saw this a little bit, we saw him in the prospect showcase this year. He had a 2-goal game. He looked like he was just going to tear up the showcase and, got off to a great start. And then, he chilled and you didn't see much of him. He kind of became invisible on the ice again. And he's the kind of guy that he has elite skills, and the Canes are going to try to bring him along. In fact, it's interesting that McKean's also said that the Hurricanes are one of the best teams to bring these kinds of players along. So if anybody's going to have an opportunity to go forward with the Hurricanes, Gunler is going to have that chance with the Hurricanes and in their farm system. So again, great words from them to give us kind of hope for Gunler. No question, he's got talent. He's a big fellow at 6'2". He can put on some weight. He'll be a big player. So he's got everything. He's got the tools. And it's just a question, can he get that work ethic? Can he get that 200-foot game down? And that's the tough part of it. And that's what, of course, Cam Abbott and the crew will be working hard with these young players on, is to see if they can turn them into the complete package so they can move to the next level. But he definitely has the tools. And we'll keep an eye on Gunler. I know he's, as we say, a polarizing guy. Some days you're all over him, and the next day, what happened to Noel Gunler? But we'll keep an eye on him. Still think he has a real shot with the Hurricanes. And again, putting him in Chicago, he's going to have the right kind of environment, and they can take their time and work with him as he should, just like you just mentioned with Bud Tricklesop as well. So again, we'll keep an eye on Gunler. One other guy, and I was going to bring him up, I thought I just mentioned him, was Justin Robidas. I've been noticing him showing up on the score sheet quite a bit. In fact, I think he had a 4-point game. And he's a guy that, as a small player, he seems to be putting it together.
Yeah, he's been kind of the first quarter X factor of this team, I believe. And when the rest of the team was kind of struggling to figure it out offensively, Robidas was the one who was just, his motor the whole time was just like, I don't really care. I'm just going to kind of play my game. And the points kind of came naturally to him. It's been a lot of fun to see him in every situation. He's been really dynamite on the penalty kill as well. I've liked what I've seen, just the tenacity. I can tell he's the kind of guy, like a guy like Rod Brindamore, just love his intangibles, kind of game in, game out. It's hard for young players to kind of get that sort of consistency of bringing your A game every night, but I don't think Robidas had any real trouble with that early on here. He's really been a pleasant, I would say, a pleasant surprise for Chicago. And you know what you're going to get from some of the bigger scorers in your lineup, but getting those extra points from Robidas and just, again, you being able to rely on him, I think, has been able to change the dynamic of this whole lineup, really, because you can shift him around in different lines, different partners, and it's not like, okay, he needs to play with Gunler, he needs to play with Jost, or you can kind of throw him around wherever, and you know what you're going to get out of him. Yeah. And so it's been a lot of fun to see him kind of break out here in his debut pro season.
Well, it's kind of interesting. Darren York kind of referenced him alongside Jackson Blake, and the reason is both of them, of course, their dads were longtime pros in the NHL, and York's position was these youngsters can really learn what it is to be a pro and what it takes to be successful in the National Hockey League. And I think Robidas, who started off, of course, last year, he paid his dues in the ECHL, had a good solid season. He had 12 goals, 15 assists, 27 points in 32 games. He's a guy that I think is really coming on strong, and he plays in all situations. It's kind of cool. He kills penalties. He's on the power play, and of course, he's been very strong in the faceoff dot. So, not a big player, but he is definitely a guy that makes things happen when he's on the ice. So we'll keep an eye on Robidas. and hopefully he's going to continue to show some cool things as the year go on. Let's shift gears and go to the blue. Who's jumping out on the blue line these days?
Well, I think it doesn't need to be said that Scott Morrow has really impressed me. I mean, in most NHL clubs, I think you'd be seeing some NHL time, but Carolina's had the luxury of owning one of the better blue line groups in the whole NHL, so they're allowed to bring Morrow down here to Chicago and to let him cook in any and every situation. And he's been just dynamite with the puck. He's been smart without it. It's been a treat to be able to watch him play. But I've sung the praises a lot of Charles Alexis Legault. He's been really one of the more eye-opening players there defensively. He's as a big body, seeing how well he can move with the puck and without it. Dominic Fensore has also been just, dynamic, and I think Canes fans are pretty well and familiar with his style and what he brings with the puck. And it was one of my favorite traits of the 22 Calder Cup championship team, just how well the blue line could move with the puck out of danger in the transition. And when Fensore can jump up on the rush, it adds a whole different dynamic to this team and how they can attack. He's really been kind of a big catalyst for this team being able to kind of get out of that early scoring slump and to start kind of piling the points up and the goals as well. So I really like what I've seen from the blue line. I thought it was going to be a strength of this team from day one. I thought this was going to be one of the better blue lines in the league, and it's kind of really starting to prove dividends the more this team kind of starts to really gain some momentum here in the month of December and just the way they've been able to pile the wins up. So, Fensore, Legault, Morrow has been huge, and the veterans have played their role as well. I mean, Ty Smith has been about a point a game player, and this is one of those things that we kind of expect from him. And those guys are crucial to bringing everyone else along and into their pro game and really kind of breaking out and the pro style. So. I kind of expected it to be a strength of this team, and it very much has been early on here.
Well, I've talked a bit about Fensore and Charles Alexis Legault before. Those guys, to me, are an outstanding pair. They've been together a good part of the season as a combination. Legault, coming out of Quinnipiac, was, again, under the radar, later round pick. This guy, he does it all. He's tough back there. He blocks shots. He's smart with the puck. He's learning and has been growing his offensive game the last couple of years. In fact, that was the only question with Legault was could he add a little bit of offense? And he's been doing that. And again, I think he's a guy that's going to come a long way. But Dom Fensore to me he's incredible. And here's what McKean said about him, and I thought it was right on. They said it's rare to see defensemen of Fensore's small size succeed in pro hockey. But he has a better chance than most because he always plays quicker than almost everybody else. If you watch him on the ice, he's very smart with his stick. He's smart with his positioning. He's outstanding getting the puck out of his zone. I mean, he's really starting to rack up the points as well. And he's just a guy that, I watched him in the showcase last year, and I was all over Dominic Fensore because I thought he was one of the best players for the Canes prospect team. He was all over it on the ice. He was driving the power play. He was in, killing penalties. He was doing it all. And he's been killing penalties as well, which is interesting with his partner, Charles Alexis Legault. Those guys have been jumping over the boards quickly on the PK. And for a smaller guy, that's really something, the confidence that Cam Abbott is showing in him. So he's a guy that I think he's got elite skills. There's no question. He can skate like the wind. He's smart with the puck. He sees the ice extremely well, and he's continuing to grow his defensive game. I think he's got a shot in the future in the NHL with someone.
Absolutely. When you're, you can play is dynamic like that, and when you can skate like him, I mean, it's I was talking about coachable skills before. Skating is just something like you have it or you don't,
Right.
and it's probably that one skill that you could have every other tool at this level, but if you can't skate like the wind like they can in the NHL, then your opportunities are limited. And Fensore can move, and he can move with the puck, and he can be smart and move without the puck. Yeah, yes, he's a smaller defender, and that's going to create some obstacles for him. He's just going to have to learn to play within his limitations, and he's shown so far that he can do it. Can he continue to do so, keep up that consistency, and create opportunities for himself? Well, I mean, he's a young player. It remains to be seen. But I'd like to see what he can do with more opportunities, with more chances to really kind of drive an entire blue line on his own. So he's been awesome early on, and like I said, I think he's been a big catalyst for this team kind of starting to break out offensively here. And there's a lot of runway out for him in front of his career, and I'd love to see him be able to make that jump ahead. He's got the tools for it.
Well, he has a great pedigree. He was the captain at Boston U his last year there. He was a Hobey Baker nominee the last 2 seasons with Boston. Hockey is first all-star. I mean, I can go up and down the list of the accolades for Fensore. So he's not coming in as a guy that's just kind of trying to find his way. He was extremely highly rated. So again, trying to find a way to transition that talent and that skill that was so dominant in the college ranks, and then get into the pros. And I think they brought him along slowly. He was in Norfolk last year for a while. Then he ended up moving up to. Of course, to Chicago as the Wolves continued to struggle and the Canes helped out a little bit. He and I think Ronan Steely were both sent up to help the blue line. In any case, the other thing I was going to mention, I think you've got a great comment on this as well. The young defensemen that the Canes have really been courting, they all have something in common, and that is that they can skate. They can really move. Himasalmi, obviously Fensore, Morrow, you can go up and down the list. All these guys can really fly. And I think that's something the Canes are, they definitely like that style of defenseman. They like folks that can jump into the play, that can be a part of it, can make things happen. And again, of course, that's what we're seeing with the Hurricanes. And one of the reasons they went out and got Shane Gostisbehere, who's having an outstanding season. So again, great to see Fensore and Morrow and the other guys, Charles, Alexis, Bill, really coming on strong. Anybody else or anything else you'd like to talk about? I think we've covered a lot of the players that are jumping out these days.
Yeah, I guess goaltending would really be the only area we haven't covered, and I think early on you saw they with Spencer Martin being called up, and they kind of handed the reins over to the 2 young netmeyers in Kajiv and Peretz.
Correct.
And it was just, it's like I said, it's a difficult league for a lot of these young players. And when you're kind of not letting your goalies sink or swim, but kind of letting your goalies kind of sink or swim, especially in their first pro years, it can be unforgiving. And I think for the task that was given to them, that both goaltenders played about as well as you could expect for 2 young guys like that. I do think that, and I guess the Carolina organization kind of agrees with me, that Kajiv has kind of outshone Peretz a little bit here. You've seen the latter heading to Bloomington in an effort to kind of in the East Coast to get more playing time consistently, which is good for all parties involved. And you've seen Kajiv take the backup role there in Chicago, which is incredibly impressive for a 19-year-old netminder. And I think the plan initially was to have him in Bloomington until they saw these couple of games and thought, okay, I think Kajiv might be the horse a little further ahead in this race here. And now that Dustin Tokarski was signed, stabilized that net a bit, and then impressed so much that's like, okay, he's gone up to Carolina. we're going to bring Spencer Martin back down here and kind of increase his waiver window. And he's been awesome. I mean, Spencer Martin he's been about as good he's about as good as an option as you can get of a goaltender here in the AHL. And he's been every bit as advertised. And he's, I've loved his, just his attitude in that, he's got a bit of that, not quite a bit of that Kochetkov fire in him, but he's not going to let anyone just kind of scrape away at his crease while he's going in there fishing for the puck. So, and Chicago fans love themselves a feisty goalie, and they embrace Kochetkov day one.
He owned it for a while, so
he's been a legend ever since. So, Martin's been awesome. I think Kajiv is maybe a little bit ahead of schedule, or but like I said, there's always shifting parts, and maybe you thought you were going to have him in the coast, but he's outplayed your other option. So here he is in Chicago, and I've mentioned his name before, but Stan Dubicki is about as good of a goaltending coach.
I was going to mention Stan. He's huge. Yeah.
Yep, he's obviously worked with Kochetkov and Lyon, who are now NHL mainstays. He's worked with Phoenix Copley and Jordan Binnington, and just there's a ton of names on the list of great tenders that have moved through Chicago that Stan's worked with. So the guy knows his stuff, and he's worked with, like I said, with Kochetkov. He's got experience with Russian netminders who might not have the best English. So he finds a way to make it work one way or the other. So he's again, young, still very raw. Kajiv is, but like I said with Finsori, there's a ton of runway ahead for this young kid. And I've liked what I've seen from him to start. And I think with whether it's going to be Martin or Tokarski that's going to be taking the main role long term here, I think it's better for him to kind of get his spot starts, pick his spots, work on his game, and it could blossom very, very well for this promising netminder going forward.
Well, we've seen this move of Russian goalies in recent years. They are really the pick these days. It was for a long time it was Finnish goaltenders, as you know, and now it's goalies out of Russia. And the Canes have loaded up on a bunch of them. They've got some still back in Russia, of course. But I know with Kaziv, they were very, very excited to get this guy. He's a big player. He's quick in the net. I watched some of his games on the Prospect Showcase. This guy's really impressive. And I think you're right on with everything you're saying, Andrew. I think the opportunity here to have him with Stan Dubicki and working in the Canes, Chicago system with Abbott and the rest of the crew. And again, with some other Russians, he's got Cherkozov there. So, he's got some partners in crime. This is great for him. He can take his time. He's working with a great professional in Spencer Martin now. And, of course, Dustin Tokarski was the same. This is wonderful for him. And I think much better than him going back to Bloomington. I do like Yana Pretz. He was outstanding in Quinnipiac, as we know, but I think there is a much higher ceiling for Kaziv, and I think that's the reason the Canes are doing this. So it's great to see he's playing. It's great to see he's getting some success, and they'll take their time with him. They're going to bring him along nice and slowly, and just help him to become acclimatized to North America, to get some language skills, and continue to grow his game and follow the great coaching that he's going to have with the folks in Chicago. So right on. Glad you mentioned him. I will talk about Kaziv any day. He is a guy that I really, really think a lot about. But, there's so many great prospects, and it's delightful to have them, a lot of them playing in Chicago this year. I was on with Nick Bass recently, and there's prospects around the globe. Gosh, there's just a bunch of them. And the Canes are very, rich right now with the talent that they have. And I think Chicago is going to play a huge role in this, as we know, because, gosh, some of the best and brightest of the Canes prospects are playing in Chicago these days. Any other thoughts or comments today, Andrew? Anything else you're seeing happening around Chicago these days that we might want to be aware of?
It's a fun and exciting team. Honestly, they're a kind of a bit ahead of schedule as much as I thought. I always harken it back to Grand Rapids in my other beat. But Grand Rapids was in a similar situation last year where those first 2 months of the season were hard to watch. And then something kind of clicked around Christmas time, and this team just shot right up to the top of the standings. The Wolves have been on fire for about a month now, and it seems like they've been able to kind of get their stuff together. I'll keep it kind of clean here. And even quicker than that Grand Rapids team was, and you see kind of the Griffins where they're at now at the top of the standings. Chicago can make this really interesting. They had a 3 games in 3 days series with the Griffins, and they took 5 out of 6 points. They just went on the road against a very tough Texas Stars team, and everyone knows how well the Dallas organization drafts and develops, and they just whomped them twice on the road in Texas, and then just hosted Milwaukee, the second best team in the division, and then slapped them around for a school day game this morning. So they're making a statement here before the holiday break for Christmas, and I mean, the sky's the limit for this team. They keep playing in this manner, and especially against some of the top competition that they're going to be facing in division, the sky's going to end up being a limit for them. Still young, still raw, but you gotta like what you're seeing out of them so far. So it's a long season. There's a lot of hockey ahead of them, but if the last couple of weeks are any indication, it's gonna be a fun ride, and I'm glad I'm a part of it.
Well, and it's we didn't mention 2 of the guys that I think are a part of the mix as well, and certainly bring a lot of character, are Josiah Slavin and of course Skylar Brindamore. Great roots for both of those guys, and I understand they're also contributing with the Wolves and continuing to again bring character, bring experience, bring some quality to the lineup, and I think that's very very strong as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and I mean, Slavin had looked like a bit of a scary play out in Manitoba last month. He seems to be healthy now, and as the captain, he's kind of steering the ship. Obviously, he's got some very good bloodlines to help him along with that. And so does Skylar Brindamore. He had, he had another goal today. 2 goals actually. Yeah. He had an empty netter, and I mean, he's just a carbon copy of his dad. I mean, from looks to personality to his play style. You know what you're going to be getting out of him. And just adding kind of those layers of grit and tenacity, just another dimension to this team. They're not going to be pushed around quite so much by maybe some of the bigger squads in the division. So everything's kind of all firing on all cylinders, and you got to kind of take those days when they come, because things can change on a dime very quickly in this league. Couple of call-ups can yes, derail a season really quick. So it's been a lot of fun, and we're just kind of getting started here. I mean, not just all these young players, the entire coaching staff is still getting their feet wet as well. And like I said, they're making noise against some of the best teams and some veteran coaching staffs that they're putting the division on notice. I've been saying I'm in with a couple other beat writers from Grand Rapids. I'm like, I think the Griffins need to start looking in their rearview mirror for the Chicago team, because I think they're starting to jump over Milwaukee as the second best team in the division. Now, again, I said a lot of hockey to play, but after kind of a bit of a gloomy first month of the season, gloomy year last year, it's starting to look a lot more sunny in Chicago.
Well, that's fantastic. And Andrew, as always, it's great to get the update on the Wolves from your perspective. Of course, folks can find you on X, and also, of course, at the Calder Times, where you're covering the Chicago Wolves as well. Andrew, I also want to say this to all the folks who've been listening or watching. I want to wish you a Merry Christmas and all the best in the holiday season. for sure as we continue on here and look forward to the coming months for the Hurricanes and obviously for the Chicago Wolves as we follow them extremely closely. For all of you who have been listening or watching, of course, if you like this episode, please press the like button. If you have comments, please feel free to leave those down below. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll respond just as quickly as possible. If you want to subscribe, and we'd be delighted if you would, please press the subscribe button, and you'll be alerted of future episodes of Storm Tracker, and of course, for the Chicago Wolves Report for sure. And again, thanks so much to everybody who's been listening or watching. And we're going to catch up real soon right here on Storm Tracker.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, and tell your friends for everything with the Canes you need. Storm Tracker.